is my sermon. Last Shabbat, though I had labored mightily to write a sermon, somehow I lost it on my way to synagogue. Luckily, at the very last minute, Scott emailed it to me on my phone, and as Shakespeare said, all's well that ends well. Or was it? For sure, the 10 frantic minutes of searching, running to my car, calling Scott, it all threw me off my game a bit. But beyond that, I headed down that all too familiar road of beating myself up. Why are you so flaky? Why didn't you pay more attention? And how about that time you forgot to bring your Haftarah script to Rosh Hashanah services? It happened. And on and on. But then I remembered the words of wisdom that Rabbi Mangold shared with us on Yom Kippur. She talked about a similar situation in which she forgot to check the copy machine for the last page of her friend's cantorial program that she, Rabbi, was narrating. In that telling, she reminded us that humans are, by our very nature, imperfect, and that it is that imperfection that bonds us together. Rabbi Mangold advised us against the self-flagellation to which I am prone, saying, and I quote, "It may distract us from enjoying the blessings in our lives. It hinders us from taking pride in our accomplishments because we're too busy beating ourselves up." Indeed, after reminding myself of that, I was then able to focus on the blessings of Shabbat, the beautiful music by Joyce, the poise of the bat mitzvah student who shared the bima with us, and my own privilege of leading services. I reflected on this as I thought about this week's Torah portion, Lech Lecha, rediscovering my disappointment with our matriarch, Sarah. In this portion, when they're traveling to Egypt, Sarah first allows her husband Abraham to lie and say that she is his sister. Abraham is afraid that the Pharaoh will kill him so he can take the beautiful Sarah as his concubine. So Pharaoh doesn't kill Abraham, but he does put Sarah inside of his harem. She might be forced to sleep with him. Why doesn't Sarah protest? Later, when Abraham and Sarah are back together again, Sarah is unable to conceive, so she gives her slave, Hagar, to Abraham so he can have a baby with her. When Hagar gets pregnant, Sarah then gets mad at her, forcing Hagar to run away. Hagar comes back, but after her son is born, Sarah kicks both mom and baby out of the house. Where is female solidarity? What happened to sisters helping sisters? All of these actions are so hard for a modern woman or man to understand. But then I wonder, what was it like to be Sarah? When Abraham tells Sarah to pretend she is his sister, what choice did she have? We all know that women had no power back in those days. Their legal, financial, and physical security was completely dependent on men. How must Sarah have felt then when she couldn't defend herself, neither to her husband nor to Pharaoh? Like many women on the wrong end of a power relationship, she probably blamed herself. Then, when she was unable to conceive, the one recognized contribution of women back then, how did that make her feel? I'd have to suppose even worse. Is it any wonder then that she turned her self-hatred outward and directed it toward Hagar, who got pregnant quite easily? While my armchair analysis might explain Sarah's behavior, I'm not suggesting that it exonerates her. But it reinforces why beating ourselves up cannot lead to anything good. Some trace the original divide between Jews and Muslims to this split between Sarah and Hagar and their children Isaac and Ishmael. It's not until we get to Parshat Kedoshim in Leviticus that we read, "Love your neighbor as yourself." You might think this means you should treat your neighbor well. True enough. But it also means that you cannot love your neighbor until you love yourself. We sometimes read this in a meditation in the Shabbat morning service. It's on page 113, but you don't have to look. We read, "Love your neighbor as yourself," you said, "and light blinded we saw that inner and outer worlds are one." This gets to the heart of the matter. When we love what is inside of ourselves, we can also love what is outside of ourselves. Still, easier said than done. Rabbi Mangold suggested we try to transform our feelings of imperfection into acts of loving kindness. I think in this year of 5782, I am reinterpreting acts of loving kindness as acts of empathy. When I see people acting disrespectfully, rudely, uncivilly, I try to put myself in their shoes and figure out, what is it that's really bothering them? What is it that's making them feel insecure or imperfect? I may not be able to fix it, but if I can come from a place of understanding, I might be able to at least control my reaction to them. Our rabbis of the Talmudic era tried to reconcile the different offended parties in this week's Torah portion with their own endings. This includes Abraham marrying Hagar after Sarah's death, Isaac facilitating the reunion of Abraham with Hagar, and Abraham visiting Ishmael in his new homeland. There's no attempt to have Sarah resolve her battle with Hagar. Contemporary rabbis create their own midrashic explanations to address this oversight. Jewish renewal rabbi Lynn Gottlieb shows Sarah understanding herself in a poem addressed to Hagar titled Achti, Hebrew or Arabic for my sister. "I am pained I did not call you by the name your mother gave you. I cast you aside, cursed you with my barrenness and rage, called you stranger, Hagar, the stranger, as if it were a sin to be from another place." Rabbi Gottlieb's poem ends with Sarah recognizing that she and Hagar have both experienced common suffering from the men around them. And she says, "Forgive me, Achti, for the sin of neglect, for the sin of abuse, for the sin of arrogance. Forgive me, Achti, for the sin of not knowing your name." To quote Rabbi Mangold once more, "We are all imperfect and we are all holy. We can all celebrate our imperfections and find the holiness within ourselves and within our neighbors. That brings us one step closer to peace and one step closer to God." Oh, and by the way, I still haven't found my copy of last week's sermon. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.